Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our presentation today. The topic for today's presentation is contingency management increases steps. To start, I'll introduce each of the members of our group, starting with myself. My name is Chatter, and I'm a special education teacher at an elementary school in Central Florida, and I'm pursuing a master's degree in applied behavior analysis to become a BCBA in a clinical setting. And then we have Brianna. She's a practicum student and behavior technician at an ABA clinic in the Metro Detroit area. She is pursuing a master's degree in applied behavior analysis with an emphasis in autism. And she's planning to sit for the board exam to obtain her BCBA credential in August of 2019. Racheal is a registered behavioral technician, as well as a team lead and assistant trainer at an ABA clinic in Indiana. She's pursuing a master's degree in applied behavior analysis with a focus in autism, and she's planning to sit for her BCABA and BCBA exams. Tresley is a special education teacher working in an elementary emotional disability classroom in Southern Indiana. And Zeke is a registered behavior technician working in Atlanta, Georgia. So the original study we chose to replicate was published in 2013 by researchers Allison Curti and Jesse Dallery. The title of their research article was entitled Internet-Based Contingency Management Increases Walking in Sedentary Adults. In order to increase walking in sedentary adults, the researchers used an internet-based intervention based on contingency management. Contingency management allows the individuals to earn desirable consequences contingent on meeting an objectively verifiable goal. And the original study was, the original study was based on 2 experiments. The first experiment utilized monetary reinforcement, and the second experiment did not include any monetary reinforcement. The original study included 12 sedentary adults over the age of 50. They conducted 2 experiments. In experiment 1, the participants received reinforcement in the form of money for meeting an increasing series of step goals in at least 3 out of 5 consecutive days. In experiment 2, the goals and the schedules were kept the same as in experiment 1, but monetary reinforcement was not provided, and the participants received their step goals through email. The results of experiment 1 showed that 6 out of 6 participants increased their steps and met a 10,000 step goal. 91% of goals were met in experiment 1. And then in experiment 2, the results showed that 5 out of 6 participants increased their steps and met their 10,000 step goal. And only 63.3% of the goals were met. So based on those results, it shows that the monetary consequences contingent on the goal attainment, it made a small contribution to the success of the participants. So the participants were a little bit more successful in experiment 1 than they were in experiment 2. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tresley, and she's going to talk a little bit about our replication study.
Physical activity to maintain individuals' personal health. The purpose of this study is to determine the effects of an experimenter arranged criteria schedule on the likelihood of 5 graduate study students on the maintenance of increased walking activity. The participants included 1 male and 4 females aged 24 to 42. All 5 participants are enrolled in the online graduate program at Ball State University. 4 participants were white and 1 was black. The setting included that participants would wear their devices daily to various activities and settings that were unique to them, which can include work, school, church, home, all the places they go. You needed to make sure you had a motion detection device, which is a pedometer, and it needs to be connected to a mobile phone app. And you also need to have a computer with reliable internet access to upload the screenshots of the steps that were walked daily. Our behavior definition, it included walking activity is defined as the act of moving the feet in an alternating motion, placing one foot in front of the other while always keeping one foot placed on the ground. For the purpose of this study, each step made while walking was counted. Steps were also counted during running activities or walking at any pace. We did event and frequency recording, and the participants, they tracked the number of steps from the time they woke up until they went using their pedometer. Then each night, participants submitted a screenshot of their daily step counts to the other group members. Our baseline was collected over 3 days, and it was used, and we used it to determine our average steps. So the step goal for the first criteria was determined by adding 1,000 to the baseline average. And then the steps were recorded in 5-day blocks. And then participants were required to meet or exceed their goal 3 of those 5 days. Then a new goal was determined by adding 1,000 to their goal or adding 1,000 to the 4th highest amount if they met that previous goal. If not, their goal remained the same. For reinforcement, it was given to participants for meeting their goal in the form of treats. The value of these treats was determined by their level of their goal. For example, if your goal was 4,000 to 4,999 steps, then you would treat yourself something that costs in the $4 range. In addition, if you did move to a new goal, you were able to add $3 to your goal. And these were self-given rewards. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Racheal, who will continue to talk about the IOA and treatment fidelity.
In regard to the inter-observer agreement, we decided to use a trial-by-trial IOA. A trial-by-trial is used for reporting, meaningful when using discrete trial data. The percentage for this is determined on whether the participants agreed as a yes or a no. The amount of agreements are divided by disagreements and multiplied by 100. In order to collect our IOA total percentage, we decided to provide a short video of ourselves performing the behavior of walking and using our pedometer via a Fitbit or a mobile device with a step tracking application. This was used to ensure proper use of each device being used and match the actual step counts to the steps tracked on the pedometer. Upon uploading the videos, 2 group members were to view the video and determine whether the individual was engaging in the behavior, and the results matched that of the pedometer tracking device that was being used. Our IOA was determined to be 100%, as all group members displayed the behavior and were utilizing the pedometer correctly. Treatment fidelity was ensured through having each group member use a pedometer tracking device, as previously mentioned, to collect data on steps taken each day. We also discussed use, where expectations, time for data collection and phases, and accurate data collection procedures before actual data collection began. During data collection, all group members were expected to take screenshots of their daily performance and steps taken and share them with the remaining group members in order to ensure accurate and honest data collection. So moving on, we will discuss each individual's progress from baseline through phase 4 of our replicated study. We collected 3 baseline data points, as Tresley mentioned, due to the time constriction of the study. Each phase consisted of 5 days, allowing us to collect data for 4 phases aside from the baseline data, in order to attempt to reach the original research study's goal of 10,000 steps by the completion of the study. As you can see in this graph, Tresley showed an overall increase in data from baseline all the way through phase 4. She began with a goal of nearly 6,000 steps per day and ended with a goal of 10,000 steps per day, exceeding her goal on multiple days. Therefore, she met the goal of the original study of 10,000 steps. However, if you notice, the criterion does not change from phase 1 to phase 2 because she did not meet her goal in phase 1, and thus she kept the same goal for phase 2. Moving on, here you can see Chatter's data from baseline through phase 4. If you notice in hers, you can see that her baseline is extremely high at an average of over 10,000 steps per day. And upon entering phase 1, her steps decreased to an average of roughly 6,000 steps. Her criterion does not change from phase 1 all the way through phase 4, as her baseline predicted the criterion for phase 1, which made her goal fairly high. And due to her steps being so high during her baseline, she had a harder time meeting that goal in all of her other phases. Moving on to Zeke's data, we can see in his graph that his data from baseline all the way through phase 4, he began his baseline with an average of about 4,000 steps per day. From this average, he determined his first goal of nearly 5,000 steps per day. But because he did not meet his goal in phase 1 of meeting 5,017 steps for at least 3 of the 5 days that were required, his goal remained the same through phase 2 of the study. However, if you look at the phase 2 through phase 4, he met his goal for the remaining phases, ending with an average of roughly 5,000 steps per day. Brianna will continue discussing the remaining group members' graphs and data throughout the study.
All right, thank you so much, Racheal. We're actually going to go ahead and talk about Racheal's graph with her results from the study. So looking at the 3 baseline points, her average there was just a little bit over 2,000 steps. So when we're moving into phase 1, her goal was set at over 3,000 steps. And when you see the transition from phase 1 to phase 2, you will see she met that goal within the 5 days of phase 1. So moving forward, we're in phase 2, which her goal has been raised 1,000 steps over the next 5 days. And so through phase 2, you see some steady increases, and she meets her goal again. So in phase 3, her goal was raised to 5,030 steps, again up 1,000, and this is up 3,000 from her baseline. And in phase 3, she did not meet the criterion to increase her goal for phase 4, so her goal number of steps remained 5,030 for both phase 3 and phase 4. But you can see her baseline average compared to her phase 4 average is just about doubled. So that definitely shows a trending upward increase. With considering the variability, you might be able to say that the reinforcer didn't prove to be extremely reinforcing in this situation, but there was some motivation there. Okay. Then moving on, this is my graph. With the 3 baseline points, I started with an average of 5,400 steps just about. So in phase 1, my goal was increase that by 1,000, so 6,400 steps. And I was able to do that for 3 out of the 5 days in phase 1. And then going on to phase 2, my goal was raised again to 7,410. So this is an increase of 2,000 from the initial my baseline average number of steps. And in phase 2, I did not meet my goal for that. So I did not move up to 8,410 steps. And then again, same thing in phase 3. It was only met 2 times, so I did not increase to phase 4. And my goal stayed the same at the 7,410 for phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. if you look at my averages, my baseline average at 5,400 and my phase 4 average to 8,400, so there's about a 3,000 step increase in the average there. So there's a little bit of an upward trend for myself as well. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of our results as the group and maybe some of the reasoning behind it, what we reflected on. So Chatter's results showed a decrease of 52.3% in step averages from baseline through the final phase. And she stated this was due to the fact that during baseline, this was conducted while she was on vacation, so she was engaging in more walking activities, a lot more physical activities than she would in her typical day-to-day life. So after returning from vacation and being in the phases of the study, her goal was set so high that it was almost unattainable. And Tresley's results, they showed a 102.6 increase in steps. She had, I believe, the highest increase for our group. And she believes this was due to the fact she did not have her dogs with her for the first 10 days of the experiment. However, after that, her dogs were added back into her daily routine, and her walking and step count increased with the activity with the dogs, walking them, all of those things that come along with that. And Racheal's results, right behind Tresley, showed a 99% increase in steps from baseline to phase 4. Racheal stated that on Sundays, because she's normally doing schoolwork and has more inactivity than other days, that she had saw a lower step count in those days. On some days during the week, she felt she had less steps due to more administration time at work, working at a desk, rather than working one-on-one with clients, being more active, moving around, things like that. Okay, so moving on, Zeke's results showed an increase of 25.8% in step averages from baseline to phase 4. So he had several outlier points back in his graph that he attributes to heavy work days spent at a computer as opposed to direct therapy, that you're generally moving a lot more, similar to what we talked about with Racheal's results. She felt she had the same limitations regarding step count based on what sort of physical activity and what she was doing in her work day. So my results showed a 56% increase in step averages from baseline to the 4th phase. And one of the reasons I believe I saw this increase is for another class, I had to create a behavioral contract, and this also focused on increasing physical activity and exercise. So that served as another motivator and another source where I was able to gain reinforcement if I followed through. Okay, so here we are. Now we're looking at our group graph, which at first glance, there's a lot going on. You don't see a really steady trend at all. It's very variable. Like we talked about earlier, one thing we attribute this to is our very different lifestyles. We all have our own things going on. We have different careers, different levels of physical activity that we regularly engage in. So those are all things that had an influence on our step counts. And the reason we decided to do a group graph is we wanted to put all of our data together and see what kind of similarity or trends that we could find, because we did have multiple participants succeed and increase their goals. So we wanted to see if there was any trend lines, but after putting the data all together, there was no clear trend or it was very variable. And now I'm going to turn it over to Zeke, and he will wrap up the presentation.
Thank you, Brianna. I will be looking at the conclusions that we came to. So after looking at our data, we found that 4 of the 5 group members saw an increase in average steps over the 4 phases, which is very good. The 1 group member who saw a decrease from baseline was on vacation during her baseline trials, and her steps those days were abnormally high, which would indicate why she had the decrease instead of an increase. In general, though, the reward-based system to increase steps was a success. Of the 4 members who saw an increase in average steps, 3 of the members increased their goals twice, over the 4 phases, and the other member saw an increase of average steps 1 time. So we were increasing our steps and we were meeting our goals. And even we had 1 member, Tresley, was able to graduate from the study, and the graduation requirements in the original study were 10,000 steps on at least 3 days during 2 consecutive phases. And Tresley managed to meet that goal, which is awesome for her and for the efficacy of our study. Next, I will discuss the limitations that we found. So some of the limitations were the access to the type of pedometer or recording device. I think that was our biggest limitation because not everyone was able to use the same device to record their steps. Some of us had a Fitbit style pedometer, while others used a phone app. And even amongst the phone apps, there were differing applications that were able to be used due to some of us phones and others not. Another limitation that we found was inability to distribute actual money to the participants. And this was a really big one. We were not only the participants, but we were also the researchers. So we were the people paying ourselves, essentially, which does speak to how reinforcing is the money that you are paying yourself. So that was definitely a limitation of our study that just came from us being in both of those roles. Another limitation was the amount of time that we had to conduct the study. There were 2 things that kind of came into play here. We were only able to do experiment 1 because of the time constraints. As stated earlier, there were 2 experiments included in the original study. We chose the first one, but we're limited just to doing 1. Another part of the time constraint was that we were not able to continue on the study. Tresley was the only participant who would have stopped because she met that 10,000 mark, but the rest of us ostensibly would have continued to record our steps and increase our goals as we went along. Another limitation that we found was whether the person was wearing the motion detection device was actually a study participant. So I touched on this a little bit in the actual money, just the fact that we were both the researcher and the participant definitely confounded some of our results to an extent. And then lastly, just access to internet and uploading information to receive new goals. At times, some of us had less than perfect internet connections, and it was difficult to upload our information and then see, did I meet the goal? And what did I do? So we had to work with the technological limitations as well. Next, we each came up with a personal quote about how we felt about the study. The first one that we have here is from Chad. She said, research helped me be a little more active in my day-to-day activities. I enjoyed seeing my progress throughout the project and sharing it with my group mates. Thanks, Chatter. Next, thanks to participating in the study, I am now aware of the important role my animals play in my level of physical activity each day. That's from Tresley, and I couldn't agree more. Racheal said, before partaking in the study, I never paid attention to the amount of steps I was taking every day. Now I look forward to seeing how active I am when I am on and off of therapy. So it's pretty neat. Next, we have one from Brianna. This study allowed me to see the differences in my physical activity depending on the day of the week and based on what I am doing. I enjoyed the personal challenge of myself, get as many steps fun without being overwhelmed. And finally, I said it was difficult on days that I had large amounts of schoolwork and found myself taking frequent evening walks to reach my goal. So I would get home and know that I needed another 1,000 steps, so it was time to go out on a walk. And then I'd like to finish up with our references here. So Curdy and Dury did the original study, internet-based content increases walking and sedentary. This study that we replicated, but we also pulled from Andrande, Berry, Litt, and Petrie, who did a study maintaining high activity levels in sedentary adults with a reinforcement thinning schedule. Both of these studies were similar, but the Andrade study had some more statistical analysis that was a bit above the purview of this assignment. So we decided to go with the Curdy-Dallery study, which I think was an excellent choice. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to our presentation, and we look forward to seeing your comments in the discussion board this upcoming week.